Brought to you by concordiatheology.org, bringing you resources that support the vigorous life of the mind in service of the gospel of Christ.
Welcome to Lectionary Kickstart. We're sparking your thoughts for Sunday as you plan your sermon or teaching lesson. I'm your host and producer, Jessica Bordelot, here with Dr. David Schmidt and Dr. Peter Napsker. They're both professors of homiletics here at Concordia Seminary, St. Louis. You can hear all about us in our introductory episode, but trust me, they are pretty good preachers. All right, let's get started. Peter, where are we in the church year?
We're in the 8th Sunday after Pentecost as we continue to think about the work of the Spirit in the church as he leads us in Christ's mission.
And what are the texts this week, David?
Portions of Ecclesiastes chapter 1 and 2, Colossians 3, Luke 12, and Psalm 100.
As always, I ask each of you to tell me which text you would choose to preach about. To determine who goes first, in our Old Testament reading, we read that all is vanity. And in English, it's been translated smoke or vapor. Everything is just passing vapor. Have you ever accidentally started something on fire?
Oh, yeah. As kids, my friend Bob and I, they had this big old tree in the backyard, and we thought there were termites in it. And so we decided to smoke them out.
Oh, no.
So we lit a fire at the bottom of the tree to smoke them out.
That doesn't sound like an accident.
I know. And then we didn't know it would burn. And then the fire department came and put it out. And then 3 hours later, it started up again.
No.
Yes. I was in so much trouble. Yep.
That's crazy.
See, that makes me think of when we were young and we'd go to my grandpa's farm in Texas and we would get those little black cat firecrackers.
Oh, yeah.
And we'd stick them in, they have these awful red ant mounds down there in the panhandle of Texas. And we'd load those up with these things and just watch the red ants blow up and then go crazy. It was fun. Wasn't a lot of mist, but the smoke was there.
I can't think of a time that I accidentally lit anything on fire, but I am pretty good at making campfires. I can do it with one match. Yes, thank you.
It's no small thing.
Good.
No, termites smoking out a whole tree. David, you win. You get to go first.
Good. Well, the text I would choose would be the gospel reading from Luke 12. And Jessica, if you could read verses 13 and 14.
Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Man, who made me a judge or arbitrator over you?"
I just find the opening of this text very interesting. That this, so you have Jesus in his ministry, healing people, teaching people, and then you have somebody from the crowd shout out and say, "Tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me." I mean, it's so interesting. I mean, he's not asking Jesus to make a decision. He's not saying, "Tell us how to divide the inheritance," right? Or tell me what we should do with our inheritance, or, I need your discernment on this. He knows what he wants done, and he's saying, "Jesus, go do it," right? And it just kind of makes me think of the times in life when we're not asking God about his will. We already know what we want, and what we want is we want God to enforce our will. And it just kind of this man's question, even though it's it all revolves around covetousness, so it revolves around your relationship to the material goods of the world. But I think it shows us a larger issue, and that is how, we all have idols, and my idol is this inheritance that's going to set me up for life, and so I'm not putting my inheritance against God. I'm just making God serve my inheritance.
Yeah, I mean, he comes to Jesus.
Right.
I mean, that's a good thing.
Jesus,
He's asking for something.
Right. I already know the kind of God I want. Could you make him work? Right? I mean, it's so weird. Jessica, what do you have a puzzled look on your face?
Oh, well, I'm thinking about Mary and Martha, right? And Mary's like, Jesus, tell my sister to help me. So in
Right.
both cases,
Yes.
they're not saying, should my sister help me? Will you just tell her to do
Right.
this?
In a way, they're in both that one and this one. They're kind of getting ahead of the too far ahead of themselves because they're instrumentalizing Jesus
Right.
for their
That's it.
relationships with others. And our relationship with Jesus does affect our relationship with others, but you got to get the cart before the horse.
Right. The relationship with Jesus comes first. Yeah.
You got to get the horse before the cart.
Right, the relationship with Jesus comes first. And so this instrumentalizing of Jesus or making God the great enforcer, we know what needs to be done. We just got to pull out Bible passages to reinforce what we want to be done. So how this man is relating to his possessions, how this man is relating to materiality in this world, how this man is relating to the need for wealth, it's going to shape his view of Jesus. Jesus becomes the one who's going to serve the way I'm looking at the world. And I think with God tries to throw that on its head and turn it so that our relationship with God shapes the way we look at the world. So we've kind of got a contrast here. And if you want to think about the overall journey of the sermon, the interesting thing then in the whole thing is the parable that Jesus tells to create this major reversal. And he tells this story of just extraordinary wealth, extraordinary good fortune, or you could even say extraordinary blessing from God, right? I mean, if you read things with a God-eyes lens, you've got all of these blessings coming to this man, and in the midst of all of that abundance, right, a land that's producing plentiful, a place to store these crops, in the midst of all of that plenty, there's this profound emptiness. And we hear the profound emptiness in verse 19. Jessica, could you read verse 19?
And I will say to my soul, Soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry.
Okay, and that's the profound emptiness, that he's addressing his soul. So the good news is he recognizes he has a soul,
Okay.
right? So that's
Start.
good, right? Bad news is he thinks what the soul needs is material goods to relax, eat, drink, and be merry. And he doesn't realize that the soul has a very different life. And the very fact that you have a soul calls you to understand that you have a different life, that you're made for more than just this world. And so this, God then interrupts the story and awakens him to the idea that life is more than just this world.
Man, it just makes you think this is a text from a long, long time ago, but boy, does it speak to today in terms of what generally the world believes about the purpose of life and the trajectory of life. Work hard, store up stuff,
Right.
and then relax. And
He
take
who
it easy.
dies with the most toys wins,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's how we, and that even that proverb, right? I mean, that's kind of it, because there's the answer to it, right? He who dies with most toy wins, and then somebody else says, but he still dies,
Yeah.
right? And that's that kind of reversal that's going on there.
But what was the man doing wrong? It wasn't wrong that he had a lot of crops or that he wanted to build a storehouse for them. That all makes sense. So he was being blessed. What did he do wrong?
Well, that's the beauty of it, right? Is that it shows us how easy it is to forget about God. Because I mean, where would you pinpoint his error? He planted and God blessed it with growth, and then he's not going to waste that growth. He's going to store it in crops, and we've got proverbs about the ant that works and labors, and so there's all sorts of wisdom literature that would talk about the way of the world, the way of vocation in this world that would be fine. And so it's really hard to tell where the man went wrong. But the one thing he does do wrong is when he speaks to his soul, he says, relax, eat, drink, and be merry. Have you heard that phrase before, eat, drink, and be merry?
For tomorrow we die.
Right. Notice how he forgot that last part. He is quoting a proverb. You find eat, drink, and be merry in the Old Testament. You also find it in the New Testament. And so eat, drink, and be merry was a proverbial saying, always reads, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. And this guy leaves off for tomorrow we die, which is what makes it kind of a joke, Because, the man says, I'll say to my soul, soul, you've laid up many goods, relax, eat, drink, and be merry. And then verse 20, but God said, tomorrow you die. All of a sudden, God finishes the proverb.
Not even tomorrow, tonight.
I know, tonight your soul is required of you. And so it's kind of this lack of understanding of who we are. We are creatures with a soul, right? And that soul lives in relationship to God. And so the text is encouraging us to be rich toward God. And, how do we become rich toward God? I think it lies in that discovery that God has been rich toward us. First, the question is, who is your God? Who is this God? He's created you. He's given you a soul. He's come and saved you from death itself. He's brought you into this world. He's given you all of these things. And now that we know who God is, now we look at the world differently. And we don't see all of these things as what is necessary for us in order to survive, but as gifts. That would be how I would look at it.
Great. Thanks, David. Now it's time for the Ask Jessica jar, the part of the show where we pick a question from the jar and I answer it from the perspective of a person in the pew. All right, David, pick a question.
Okay, the question is, which aspect of the sermon was especially helpful?
Oh, I really liked the first half where you talked about our questions or our prayers to God show not so much what he would want us to do or pray for, but what we would want him to do, right? Where it wasn't, should my brother split the inheritance, but tell him to do it.
Right, yeah.
I was sitting there thinking of, oh, shoot, I do that. Some things that I'm praying for, I'm just saying, God, will you just fix this? Instead of like, God, in what way would you have this be fixed?
Yeah, and then you think about it, isn't it funny that what God does is God looks at us and says, I know what I want you to do for me. I'll come and do it myself for you, right?
Yeah.
And that's what he does, is he comes and he does it for us, in a sense, to
Great.
lead us into it.
Thanks, David. Peter, what about you? What would you preach about?
Well, I want to think about the Colossians 3 text, Colossians 3, 1 to 11, although I'm going to suggest we extend it just a little bit, but we'll get to that later. Could we maybe begin, Jessica, would you read the first 3 verses from Colossians 3?
If then you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things that are above, not on things that are on earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God.
All right, I want to start with a question. Why would you need to tell someone to set their minds on things above?
Because they're preoccupied with other things.
Right. You've got they're thinking about things that are not above.
Right.
They're thinking about things that are below. Their minds are being pulled down. This is kind of the idea that I want to think about for this text. So you're kind of thinking about what led Paul to write this. Was that the people in Colossae, their minds were being pulled down. And that makes me think of a very powerful force in this world, one of the most powerful forces in the world, the one that burdens us all. You know which force I'm talking about?
The dark side?
No, not that force.
Gravity.
Gravity.
There we go.
Gravity. So
I'm
actually,
defying gravity.
Defying gravity. Right. Actually, if I were going to name the sermon this, I think I would call it Defying Gravity.
Wow, there
Nice.
you go.
I would not
relate
bust
to
into Wicked.
everybody. Oh, yes. Oh.
I thought of this when I was watching an usher at my church. His name is Floyd. Floyd, he's no longer an usher because now his health has deteriorated. But a couple of years ago, or last year sometime, he was walking up the marble steps to our church, to the chancel, and the very last step caught his toe.
Oh, no.
And so Floyd is 93 years
Oh,
old.
no.
And it's really tall, 6'2", 6'3", something like that. And he started to go down. And it was really you could almost feel the whole congregation lurch forward.
Right.
There's no way we could have helped him.
Right.
Fortunately, there was an usher there close by who reached down and kept him from having a really bad accident. But that pull down that caught Floyd, to me, that is such a part of life that we don't ever even think about. And I think Paul, of course, doesn't use the word gravity in the text, but he does talk about this downward pull that Christians from the very beginning, that all of us experience, and of course we're talking about sin. And so that's kind of the idea that I want to work with in this sermon, that there's a downward pull, and what does Paul do and say about that? When I think about the downward pull, there's probably things we can all think of that are kind of big falls, big mistakes. Stuff like Floyd almost going down, and that could have been really bad for Floyd. But I also think about little things that pull us down, that drag our minds to the things of this world in an unhelpful way. Have you heard about those new sidewalk lights in Melbourne, Australia?
No.
And
I
there's some
like it
also,
already. Tell me more.
There's some in South Korea too. I read about. So there's this people. You know what I'm talking about, right? There have been a lot of accidents, pedestrian accidents in cities because people are texting while walking.
Oh, okay.
So they call it distracted walking instead of distracted driving. But you guys have all experienced this where you're looking down at your phone. And apparently there were in Victoria, in Australia, the state of Victoria, I guess, there were 40 deaths, 500 injuries of people walking into traffic because their eyes were focused on their phones. Right. This intersection in Melbourne, Australia, they put in walk lights in the ground. So you can see it. Usually you look up and you can see the guy walking and the guy doesn't stop.
Right.
So they installed these lit up either red or green so you can just keep looking down.
Oh my gosh.
And it actually cut, apparently, they did this in South Korea too. They cut the injuries and deaths by a half just by having people,
Wow.
since they're already looking down, we'll put either green, it was an electronic light that would light up green or red, so you don't even ever have to look up. To me, what's just striking about this example of the street lights is that it's obvious the danger when you're walking in a busy city and you're texting or looking at your phone. That's obvious. People have died. There have been serious injuries. What Paul's talking about here is the danger that's no less, but it's not so obvious to us today. And so you look at the things that he warns the Colossians about. I kind of noticed there were almost kind of two categories. If you look in verse 5, would you read verse 5, Jessica?
Put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you: sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry.
What do those have in common? Do you guys notice a common thread between those five? Sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, covetousness.
They kind of start with your thoughts. They're kind of internal. Hey?
I think it's kind of about ourselves. Evil desires, sexual immorality, covetousness, they're all kind of inward directed. And then Paul says about covetousness, that's idolatry. So you've got some ways we're pulled down or by our internal selfish,
inward,
kind of we're pulled into
inward.
ourselves.
Yeah.
But then he gives kind of another short list in verses 8 and 9. You want to read 8 and 9?
But now you must put them all away: anger, wrath, malice, slander, and obscene talk from your mouth. Do not lie to one another, saying that you have put off the old self with its practices.
Now notice those seem to be more directed toward others. Mm-hmm. And so there's the malice, the anger, the lying to one another. And so it's almost like, I think you could categorize these in a way. Paul's talking about kind of internal, external, self-serving, and others hurting or something along those lines. But I think in a way what he's doing is he's pointing out how many different ways there are to be dragged down. The downward pull, the gravity pull, the eyes focused on the ground. And so these are things that Paul is warning the Colossians about that I think would be appropriate to warn your own hearers about, the ways in which our sinful nature and the world kind of pulls us down, this relentless gravitational pull down to the earth. So then I would think about, because that's kind of the problem that you'd address in the sermon. What Paul says, the good news, the promise that we have, is just filled with this. It's kind of the whole text is bracketed with promise here. Okay, so you've got the verse you read at first, verse 1. If you have been raised with Christ, well, the joy of the preacher is not to have to leave it at a conditional.
Right, yeah.
But you have been raised with Christ.
Right.
This is so everything that's going to follow is the life of the Christian. You have been raised with Christ. So that's one promise. Verse 4 is another promise. When Christ, who is your life, appears, you will appear with him in glory. So now we're talking about the return of Jesus, the promise that we will be with him in glory. You go down to the last verse, in verse 11. It just concludes with Christ is all, and he is in all. This one who rose from the dead, this one who has raised you, this one who is returning and who will bring you into glory with him. He is all, he is in all for you. And so I think there's a nice way to preach to kind of a word of warning in terms of the downward pull, and also the promise. What does God do about this downward pull? Well, in a way, you might say he pulls us all the way down to death with Jesus, and then raises us back to life. And then he will raise us when the Lord returns. So I think that kind of movement from downward to lifting up would be kind of the theological movement of the sermon. It was interesting. I was looking at a sermon that Luther preached on this text, and Luther emphasized, and again when he preached on this text, the need for Christian character in the church. The need for Christians to think and to act and to speak and to exist with a different kind of character as baptized children of God. We're not simply people who believe that Jesus rose from the dead and then we go back to the ways of the world. We have been raised with God in Christ. So Paul leads right from this into encouragement toward Christian character. And I think that's where Luther got the emphasis on compassion and humility and kindness. It's tempting for us always as Christians to think about, okay, I'm pulled down by sin and God has raised me in Christ. I look forward to spending eternity with him. Amen.
Mm-hmm.
But Paul doesn't leave it there. He says, therefore,
Right.
Forgive one another as you've been forgiven. Be kind, be gentle. And that's what takes me back to that. I started with that story about Floyd falling down.
Right.
And I think about when we're on our own, we're all going to get tripped up. It's just going to happen because we're sinful and we can't escape the old evil foe. But when we have brothers and sisters around us, like the other usher that was there to catch Floyd, when we are walking together in community, then we have the support. We have people who are being compassionate and kind toward us, and we are being compassionate and kind toward them, and we help each other. We help lift one another's eyes up to Jesus. So I think you could have a nice encouragement toward a Christian living that is in community, that helps one another live in this resurrection promise.
Now it's time for the Ask Jessica jar.
All right. What might be a pitfall when delivering this sermon?
Oh, that is hard. A pitfall when delivering this sermon. I liked the theme of gravity pulling us down. I thought that was really clear and helped me see that that's our natural inclination, is to look inward and look down. I like the title, Defying Gravity. Totally keep it. You have to have that in there. Teenagers and people who love musicals, well, their ears will perk because that's the big song in Wicked. Very good. Love it. And I was thinking of a children's message.
Oh, yeah?
Yes, because gravity, don't do it on gravity. That will be too hard to understand. But you could talk about sharing, and it is very hard to share. It's easier to be focused on yourself, but God has shared with us and given us Jesus. So I thought that would be easy and simple. It could be a children's message.
I can think of a
outward.
pitfall.
Perfect.
If you go the route of getting into the technology, the phone thing, because that's such a...
There you go.
There are some of us, I think rightly so, are very concerned about how much technology is controlling people in phones. But it could turn into a kind of an anti-tech message. And so I'd want to be really careful. If I use that stuff from Melbourne or from Seoul, South Korea, I would want to just manage it so that it doesn't become an anti-phone.
Very good. Because we have heard from the time I was little that technology is bad. The church telling us technology is bad. And it has bad aspects to it, but it also has wonderful aspects to it, right? So God has been using technology in the church since he gave clothing to Adam and Eve. So excellent. That's awesome. That could be a pitfall. Good job. That's all for today. We have free resources to guide your next step in planning at concordiatheology.org. Check it out. You can find more episodes of Lectionary Kickstart and our other podcast, Tangible Theology Learned and Lived, on any of the major podcast apps. If you'd like to see the show continue, please subscribe for free, share, leave a review. I'm your host and producer, Jessica Bordelot. Join us next week here at Lectionary Kickstart when Dr. David Schmidt and Dr. Peter Nafsker will spark your thoughts for next Sunday.
Tomorrow we die.
People have died.
Tomorrow we die.
For tomorrow we die.
Tomorrow you die.